Hello, everyone. Good morning, and it's true that I flew into Budapest this morning, and so I would have to fly out rather soon again, but if I'm going to repeat stuff you heard already or be rather contradictory to it, I think that could be an advantage, because I actually think I might be here to give a little bit of a provocation and maybe food for thought, and hopefully there's going to be a chance also to have a little bit of interaction afterwards. But first, you should know that I'm not a native English speaker. I have a tendency, nonetheless, to speak a little bit fast, and we have some wonderful interpreters trying to do their best to get some messages across in Hungarian. So just to make sure that we are still on the same page about movement and testing our wonderful interpreters, I'd like everybody to now raise their right hands, please. Oh, we need interpreters to do better. Everybody raise their right hands, please. Everybody, I'm not going to continue until, great. Everybody raise their left hands, please. Much better. Everybody raise their right foot, please. No? Yeah, okay, you can do it. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation about ISCA and our thoughts about health-enhancing physical activity, and I think it's an interesting perspective to hear about the development of the Hungarian School Sport Federation in this field as well. Fundamentally, I think we can see that there are a few challenges coming at organizations such as ours, and maybe also in Hungary, if we focus strictly on health-enhancing physical activity. So I would like to offer a few critical remarks to that effect. Before I do that, I would like to reflect a little bit on an experience I had 2 days ago. I'm coming from London, where there is an organization that is an umbrella organization for the fitness industry, mostly the commercial part of the fitness sector in the UK. I'm sure Jenny knows well about it. It used to be called the Fitness Industry Association. So they were taking care of the interests of the fitness industry in England. And fundamentally, they made a radical shift, in my assessment, 4 years ago, when in fact they decided to rebrand themselves to be not Fitness Industry Association, but rather UK Active. And they said they wanted to change their mandate to not only try and serve their members and their specific industry interests, but rather be the promoter of physical activity in the UK. And so they really took a large step away from narrow-minded member interest and took a broader perspective and a broader mandate upon themselves. I think that's interesting because we see other organizations trying to do the same, moving away from a narrow field of interest and trying to take upon themselves responsibility for a broader physical activity promotion agenda. This can be a good thing. It can also sometimes be a challenge. And specifically, what I experienced in London was the following. While UK Active is trying to position themselves and take space in this area of health-enhancing physical activity, other organizations might find themselves a little bit overlapping or even challenged by that positioning. And so there was also a representative from Jenny's organization, the Youth Sport Trust, speaking at the conference. And if everybody in the conference is focusing on getting more people to move more often, well, then there's something lost on the way, perhaps. And in the case of the Youth Sport Trust, a lot of people thought it was great that we had to use the schools and the vehicle of schools to get people and children to move more. And I think the director of the Youth Sport Trust was a little bit challenged in this, because fundamentally there's a lot of value in physical education that goes beyond movement. And there's a big wave coming, politically speaking, that we should get people to move more because it's health enhancing. But what then happens to the other elements of physical education? The elements of quality, the elements of didactics and pedagogy and other values that might be embedded in also the Hungarian School Sport Federation. So think a little bit about it. If before you take the leap of faith into the health-enhancing physical activity space, what might you lose along the way? So ISCA is an international umbrella organization. We have members all over the world, and we try to help them develop faster than they would otherwise have done by looking at trends, by discovering good practices, and by being an advocate for physical activity and grassroots sports indeed. We have members all over the world, but in fact, the most important thing we can do is probably not to ask them what they would like to do, but to discover what they could do in the future. And what could grassroots sport organizations do in the future? Well, we're very happy to have Hungarian School Sport Federation as a member of ISCA. We're happy to have other school sport federations as members. But fundamentally, what we've seen is these organizations need to decide and discover major trends all over the world. So what are the trends? We can safely say that in the beginning of our existence, that's 20 years ago, there was a lot of focus on social inclusion, on democracy, on volunteering inside of ISCA and inside our member organizations. But some 12 years ago, we started discovering the trend of health-enhancing physical activity. And since then, we never looked back. We have been promoting this as the key driver for people's wellness and for local grassroots sport organizations' prosperity to focus on and to promote physical activity with a health-enhancing view. And I think it can be a good thing that we did this. It has given us so many opportunities. I mean, we have been very lucky or good to run EU-funded projects. We've run 53 EU-funded projects over the last 15 years. So this is a machine, and we've been lucky or good at doing this simply because we decided to focus specifically on health-enhancing physical activity. But the sector that ISCA represents, first and foremost, probably is the grassroots sports sector that we heard about before. And so do all those members want to focus on health? Can they actually deliver on health even if they want to? This is the question. And sometimes we have to discover also what are the core values of our organizations, what is the main reason we're here, so that we don't only follow the trend of health-enhancing physical activity, but do it based on some core values. The health-enhancing physical activity topic has also meant that ISCA has changed its focus. So when we talk about the value of our sector, and when we talk about the reason to focus on grassroots sports, we have to speak the language of politicians. And today the language of politicians very much is the language of economics. And if health is the driver, then we need to focus on what is the health benefits, financially speaking, of getting more people to be physically active. And so we've delivered a report focusing on this, and we had the documentation then that 80 billion euros every year is lost due to people not being sufficiently physically active. And this is the language that politicians can understand. On the other hand, we also have to acknowledge that before we focused on health-enhancing physical activity, we were actually trying to provide the value and the documentation that physical activity and sport can also be good for social inclusion, for democracy, for education indeed. So we can't do everything at once, and we have to think about what do we not focus on if we focus so much on health-enhancing physical activity. We have been running a lot of EU projects. I've decided not to go so much in detail with those. Fundamentally, what we've tried to do is to help our member organizations discover health-enhancing physical activity and integrate it into the strategies. You can't just do this on the side. If you really believe that health-enhancing physical activity is a future driver for our sector, then you need to do it as an adopted and full part of your strategy. And we tried to help our members go in that direction. We've also involved ourselves more and more in the setting of the schools and are running now, amongst others, a project called Active School Communities. It's led by our Bulgarian partner, and we're happy to have also the Hungarian School Sport Federation as a partner in this project, focusing on physical activity in the schools, in the classrooms, in physical education, but also in the breaks and on the way to school, and of course the collaboration, as we heard about, between the schools and local sports clubs. What we've also done recently is we tried to say how can we help our member organizations, various physical activity organizations, mostly in Europe, to do more. And we discovered that we could start a campaign and give them the tools to ignite and focus on people getting more physically active. And this campaign we called Now We Move. We started in 2012, and we had to get some political attention first. So before you do anything else, you need to have some data. You need to have some information and evidence. And we started by looking at what is known by many as the Eurobarometer studies, fundamentally asking the different citizens in Europe how much they are physically active. And this is what it looks like. These are pretty boring statistics, and you may not be able to see it, but of course Hungary is also here somewhere, and you might want to look at how does Hungary compare to the other countries. If you're better than the other countries, you'll go home and take a rest. If you're worse, you'll feel a little bit bad and might have to do something. But fundamentally, this is about comparing yourselves to other countries, and it's not politically interesting. Politically interesting is saying there is actually some countries that are doing quite a lot better than other countries. In other words, there's a reality out there that's possible to achieve. And there's a gap between the most active and the least active countries. And if you take the most active countries in Europe, they have average levels of physical activity of 60%. The least active, no, actually not the least active, the top 5 most active are 60%. The average in the EU is around 40%. So we said there's a gap between 40% and 60% that we need to close. And closing a gap of 20%, and you have a European population, as long as the UK is still in the EU, of around about 500 million Europeans, well, closing a gap of 20% of 500 million means we have to get 100 million more citizens to be physically active. And we said this has to be the vision. These are the people we want to reach, to make them more active and to make them have better health as a consequence. So very much the campaign was initiated on the basis of HIPE as well, and with the promise to actually try to help people live healthier lives. How can we get 100 million more Europeans to be physically active? Obviously, ISCA cannot do that on its own. This is something that is more an offer than a promise. It's an offer to other sectors to join in. Because if you want to take on yourself the HIPE agenda, you need to say, as I think also the Hungarian School Sport Federation has done, that we need to work in partnerships with other sectors. We need to work with local clubs. We need to work with the private sector. We need to work with all the other sectors that you can see here on the screen to be able to deliver more physical activity. One of the campaigns that we started was called Move Week. We did it the first time in 2012, and it actually grew from there. So much so that we didn't really see it coming. It was an astronomical success in our estimation, and you can see here some of the numbers from last year where we had more than 7,000 events that joined the Move Week. Either they were already existing and took part and benefited from the branding, or they actually were created from scratch to be able to be part of something bigger, namely a European campaign. And so the Move Week was an example that we have started. Nowadays, there's also something called the European Week of Sport that very much aligns with this idea. And we've decided to try and expand the campaign to look at even further ways to get people to be more physically active. So this year, we've been delivering various activities under the umbrella of the Now Move campaign, and you can see some of them here. There's a cross-border cycling event trying to promote people to be active with a team of cyclists that went all the way through Europe, having side events along the way. We have a European flash move. On one particular day, we had more than 200 groups doing the same choreography, the same dance, and trying to ignite some excitement about the agenda of physical activity all over Europe. European Fitness Day is an interesting example. In fact, it's taken from the UK, where they have a National Fitness Day. This year, the National Fitness Day in the UK alone had more than 1 million British people being active on this particular day. And we thought that model might work in other countries too. And the fitness word and the fitness sector is something interesting. Parts of that sector is commercial and is focused very much on how can we get people into specific fitness centers paying a monthly fee. But there's also lots of voluntary sports clubs that are delivering fitness activities. And we wanted a little bit to also take back the fitness word from the evil commercial sector and to try and say, well, maybe there are other people that need to be engaged in fitness and promotion of fitness across Europe. So this has been tested this year as well. The European School Sport Day obviously is led by our partner, the Hungarian School Sport Federation, and with a great example in Hungary, there are other countries now taking up these activities as well. And I'm sure you've also heard from Jenny today what they're doing in this space in the UK. So there's lots to learn, and our role fundamentally is to promote those learnings to other countries around Europe and indeed the rest of the world. As a matter of fact, the rest of the world is also taking up our campaigns now. The Move Week is being implemented next week in Latin America, and we expect to have 12 countries engaged and more than 8,000 events. So it seems like there's something valuable in having international campaigns that local organizations can then join. But let me go back to my point and my critical remarks about HIPE, because I believe, and I can hear from the ISCA members as well, that it's important to focus on health and on HIPE. But when we also try to do campaigns such as the No Elevators Day, which is obviously trying to talk to people that are taking the elevators instead of the stairs, typically in workplaces, are we then losing touch with our member base, which are fundamentally focused on delivering sport and physical activities in sports clubs? Is this relevant to them? Can ISCA take upon itself the role of a broad agenda promoting physical activity when our membership is only partly doing that, in fact? This is a question I would like to finish also by asking to you here in Hungary. Who is, in fact, the main organization, the leading organization, or the most capable organization to deliver health-enhancing physical activity and the promotion of health in this way in Hungary? And who should it be? It seems to me that since 2012, the Hungarian School Sport Federation has also taken upon itself a mandate to do more, to look beyond the schools, to try and grab this agenda, benefit from it, and give something back, to align stakeholders. But there will be other organizations in Hungary, I'm sure, that also feel it's their mandate. So there's also a battle to be there first and to move on the HIPE agenda. And if you can do it without losing your core values, which is probably my main message today, then I would recommend the HIPE agenda for any organizations focusing on physical activity, making sure you always stay true to your values and to your starting point, and then for the at least next 10-15 years, the HIPE agenda will be definitely all over the place, and if you're part of the wave, you will benefit. Thank you very much.